Essentially what we do with this, as we've done with the schools and also members of the public, we do have a short presentation to you in respect of the current state of the economy. When I say current state of the economy, I mean figures as derived from the Reserve Bank of Fiji statistics as of October of last year. Some of the figures are more current. For example, the most recent figures that have been revealed or actually calculated as far as, for example, the foreign reserves are concerned. So we generally try and keep it very, very informal. So we'll have the presentation. And then, of course, you can ask any questions after that and have any of your own submissions you may want to make. You may want to make some oral submissions. You may want to actually have some written submissions that you can hand over to us. Or alternatively, we'll give you addresses where you can actually make your submissions after this. But we expect all submissions from members of the public to be received by next Friday. As you know that the budget timeline is coming close. As we've announced today, the budget will be delivered on the evening of the 29th of June, which is the day before the public holiday, which is on the 30th of June. And as the process, as you know, is that a week has to pass before Parliament can debate it. And then the debate, of course, will take place in the month of July. Some people have actually asked about the processes. We've had the public consultations. The Permanent Secretary who's here has already had one round of consultations with the respective ministries and their permanent secretaries. So they've been through the figures. Next week, I sit with her across the table with the other ministers and their permanent secretaries and again go through a second round of consultations as far as the respective ministries are concerned. Then, of course, we formulate the budget. So if we can start off, we'll start off with the first slide. I have to get out of my high school mode because I have to explain quite a lot in detail. I'm sure I don't have to do that level of analysis or details for you because I'm sure you understand most of it. Economic growth rate, of course, it is only the second time in Fiji's history have we had a growth rate consecutively for 7 years. With the forward projections, of course, for 2018 and 2019, we expect an unprecedented of 9 to 10 years of economic growth. Why is economic growth essential? Of course, it creates jobs, it creates robustness within the economy, and it is essentially, good as far as the investment environment is concerned. You can see that we've been growing continuously since 2010. Winston, of course, had a huge impact in respect of our growth rates. The interesting thing is that, notwithstanding the fact that Winston caused us a loss of $1.4 billion US, which is approximately a third of our GDP, notwithstanding that we still have a growth rate of 2% at least for this financial year. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Next slide, please. What are the contributions to the growth? Of course, as a government, our objective is to have the economic growth rate as broad-based as possible. Essentially, we don't want to only depend on one or two sectors contributing to the growth. We want to have it as wide as possible because it is mitigating your risk. If you depend, for example, only on sugar and tourism, and if you have a cyclone that wipes out the tourism properties and also agricultural sector of sugar, then we're in dire straits. So as far as we are concerned, we want to grow the economic base. Of course, you have a broad base here, but you can see agriculture contributed 0.31% towards the growth. Fisheries was very slow, or very small, 0.02. Forestry was even lower, 0.01. What was large, actually, if you can see from that far, I'm sorry about the slide being so far away, you have to blame Natabua High School. Manufacturing was 0.56. That's fairly substantial. And of course, we do manufacture quite a lot of things in Fiji now. But that 0.56 also includes the manufacture of sugar. Construction, again, is quite significant, 0.33. Mining, lower, 0.4. Electricity and water, 0.1. Services sector, just to highlight the key ones, financial is quite good, 0.39. Transport, 0.37. Wholesale retail, 0.37. And accommodation, 0.32. This is obviously from the tourism sector, and the others are there, as you can see. Now, if you look at the next one, what are some of the factors that the Reserve Bank looks at? So, the investment indicators, as of 16 October last year, you can see that the value of building permits issued between Jan and September. Please remember this also includes the cyclone period when things slowed down a bit. Notwithstanding that, it went up by 12.7%. Value of work put in place went up by 10.5%. Domestic cement sales went up by 11.1%. If I can bet your bottom dollar, not your bottom dollar, not mine, that if we are to compare the figures for this period, it'll be a lot higher because there's a lot of reconstruction has already started. Imports of investment goods went up by 15.7. Government capital expenditure, of course, increased by 7.8. You can see in the same period, however, new investment lending went by 10.3. You would generally expect that after a cyclone. Lending for real estate went down by 17.8, and lending for building construction went by only 1%, went down by 1%. Consumption indicators. We got lots of vehicles, I should say, in Fiji now. New vehicle registration went up by 27.5%. Second-hand vehicle registration went up by 7.8. New lending to wholesale and retail trade, 13.2. Imports of consumption goods went up by 14.7, which obviously shows that people are spending lots of money. They're buying a lot of consumption goods. PAYE collections went up by 4.9%, which indicates generally two things. People's salaries have gone up and or combination of both, that more jobs are being created because more people are paying PAYE. That's why it's gone up by 4.9%. New job advertisements went up by 15.1%. Personal remittances, these are Fijians living offshore, sending money to their friends and relatives. Fijians playing rugby. Fijians working as nurses, as security officers, as caregivers, etc., sending money back home. Variable consumption, adjusted for the decline rate, went up from 15, which went down from 15.9, also actually went up. In other words, more people are buying things. New lending to private individuals went down by 4.7%. Again, generally you expect private appetite for borrowing would be reduced after a cyclone. Now this is just to show the vehicle registration. You can see the light blue here is the second-hand vehicle registration and dark blue is the new vehicle registration. Just by comparison, 2005 there were 6,088 second-hand vehicles registered and 3,363 new vehicles registered. By comparison, 2016, 10,000 new second-hand vehicles were registered and 5,000, as opposed to the 3,300, new vehicles registered. For those of you who do know Suva, Nasinu, Lemi well, will know about the traffic congestion. Those of you who drive to Lautoka, Nandi will also know about the traffic congestion. People buy cars in Fiji because it's also seen as a sign of doing well socially. When you have social mobility in the socio-economic scale, people like to buy cars because it's seen as a sign of you doing well. Friends and family like to say, my son has bought a car. He can now afford to buy a car. Of course, it means that a lot more vehicles on the road. It does pose challenges for the future. And we have to, in terms of our development plans, need to be able to factor in these issues. Because, of course, you want the transportation system to be still robust in terms of being able to get to places quicker. We have people complaining, for example, now because the number of cars on the road between, say, Nasinu and Suva, it can take at peak period over an hour to get to Suva. So obviously there are numerous new challenges from that. But as far as that is concerned, it goes to show the vehicle registration went up. Of course, it has gone up also because we reduced duty on hybrid vehicles. So it became a lot more affordable. And of course, the banks have now participated a lot more actively in the motor vehicle finance sector. Those of you who are retailers would know of this. This is just simply tracking retail sales. This is a survey. Average growth about 7.1% over the period from 2006 to 2016. Over 10 years, average growth rate is about 7.1. Of course, we've got troughs and we've got lows up there. Troughs and highs, I should say. Inflation. Generally, inflation actually has been very good. Since 2014, inflation has been generally below 2%. There's a bit of a trough here, a high here, I should say. But Winston, of course, had a huge impact. You see the peaks over here and there, of course. A lot of it had to do with agricultural produce. Like I was telling people in Suva after Cyclone Winston, a bunch of bananas cost you $20. Kava is still being retailed at $110 a kilogram, when it used to be about $45 a kilogram. Of course, many people, the consumption rate has still not reduced, even though kava has gone up by up to $110 a kilogram. Beans, a bundle of beans cost about $5 a bundle at one stage, long beans. Is now, of course, the price is stabilized because the supply has actually increased. Inflation has actually come down, to 4.1%, and we expect a downward trend in the inflation rate. Foreign reserves. Not many people know about foreign reserves. As I've explained to the high school students, foreign reserves is essential and critical. It's a sign of how healthy your economy is. The international benchmark is that you should have at least 4 months, these are the months, you should have at least 4 months worth of foreign reserves, then you are in a stable position. Nearly everything that we have is imported. This iPhone, this phone the gentleman has, the watch he has, the clothes that he's wearing, maybe it's sewn in Fiji, but the cloth is imported. The gel he puts in his hair is imported, it's not made in Fiji. Everything, the shaving gear you use is not made in Fiji. So you need to be able to trade in foreign currency to be able to buy those goods. Yen, US dollar, Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, Singapore dollar. We had $549 million worth of foreign reserves in 2005. Today we have $2.1 billion worth of foreign reserves. This is the latest figure as of April 2017. So we are sitting comfortably at 5.8 months worth of foreign reserves to be able to buy and sell, trade in foreign goods and services. Generally, IMF, World Bank, international organizations, or export-import banks, when they look at you, when they want to trade with you, they look at your foreign reserves. But that goes to show your capacity to be able to pay your foreign debt. If you have a higher capacity to pay your foreign debt, you become a lot more attractive to be able to lend to, and your interest rates actually become lower. So that's very, very important. Next one, please. Okay, right from the Ratu Mara government days, we've always run a deficit, except probably about 3 times in our entire post-independent history have we had a surplus. Every other single year, every other single government have we run deficits. There's one surplus here in 2008. That was probably because of underspending. That's why there was a surplus. But generally, we've been running a deficit. Our government's target has been to obviously ensure that these lines become shorter. So we run lower deficits. As you can see, that because of certain aberrations we've had because of cyclones here, and of course Winston here, we've had to increase the deficit level. The deficit was going down, 4.3, 3.2, 1.6 in the previous financial year. It has gone up to 4.7 because we've actually had to spend an additional approximately $220 million because of Cyclone Winston. We don't like cyclones. It kills people, it damages your property, it disrupts your life, but it also costs a lot of money. The school rebuild itself now is going to cost us about $180 million. We of course then provide additional assistance to farmers and various other stakeholders, build roads, repair jetties, build washed away jetties, build washed away river crossings, all of that. If the Cyclone Winston had not taken place, this line here would have been somewhere over here. So the deficit would have been much lower, at least by $220 million. Total revenue, we need to make money too. All governments need to make money, we need to run government like a business. 2004, the government collected a revenue of $1.1 billion. This year we're collecting $3.1 billion. In other words, we've almost tripled our revenue. How have we tripled our revenue? We've done some smarter taxation reforms. It has also meant all of you pay less taxes now than you ever paid before in Fiji. The income tax threshold has been increased from $8,600 to $16,000. What that essentially means is that those people, some of you who are business people, used to pay your employees, if you paid them $13,000 a year, before they paid taxes after $8,600. Today they no longer pay any taxes until they reach the amount of $16,000. So in that way, of course, whilst we reduce taxes, companies no longer pay 33% tax, they pay 20% tax. If your company is listed on the South Pacific Stock Exchange, you pay only 10% tax. That's why I would encourage those of you businessmen who are here and women who are here, if you have a potential to list your company, do list your company, because not only will you pay lower taxes, but it will also create the capital markets in Fiji. So ordinary mums and dads can actually buy shares in your companies, and that is very, very important to develop the capital markets. But notwithstanding the fact that we've reduced taxation, it has also meant that we have people doing greater compliance. Before, companies that may pay 33% tax, they did not like it, they may have two books. One book for FERCA, one book for themselves. The book for themselves maybe shows the actual revenue and sales. The one for FERCA maybe has a lower one. So now, because it's 20%, they say it's not worth their while choring from the system, so they might as well pay the tax. So it increases compliance. So it helps with compliance. So if you can, sorry, just go back. So the revenue actually has increased quite significantly if you see from there. Next one, please. What are the avenues of collection from, revenue collection? Direct taxes contribute 23%, 21%, 23? 21? 21. Sorry, I can't see that far. This is corporate tax, PAYE, etc. Value-added tax contributes 30% towards our revenue generation. Customs, 21%. I have to be frank with you, and as I've said to many other forums, that we still have business people who are stealing from the system. They bring in goods worth $10 million, they declare $2 million, and hopefully they'll get away with it. That's what they think. So we've increased compliance. So generally the rule has been that they declare $2 million, but it's $10 million worth of good. If they get caught, they say, okay, might as well pay it. But you try luck. So that's been an issue there for us. Also, of course, we have people stealing from the value-add system, the VAT. A lot of people have argued about, the equalization of the VAT, and we can discuss that, and I think it's very important. But we found that supermarkets that sold goods that were VATable and sold goods that weren't VATable, in their returns, they actually cooked the books quite significantly. The point of the matter is that if your tax regime is fairly low as we have it, it's very attractive, it's the cheapest in the Southern Pacific, apart from the tax-free havens where you don't get goods and services a lot more expensive, you will find that we'll be able to increase our revenue collection and therefore be able to do a lot more development projects. Next one, please. Total expenditure. Now, what we've done, we've grouped here together for you the total spend on infrastructure development, health, education, access to justice, and social protection. These are the more sort of social projects that, social spending that we are doing within the system. So infrastructure development, of course, is the roads, jetties, bridges, and all of that. Now, part of that too, which of course some people don't seem to understand, is when we are building infrastructure also, we're taking a resilient approach to building our infrastructure. Now, you would have seen, for example, the 4-laning of the road coming out of Nadi Airport. The trick question I always ask the students is, apart from the 4 lanes, what do you see that's different? And the answer, of course, is you don't have any overhead cables. The electricity cables, the telecom cables are all underground. And they are not underneath the road. They are on the side of the road. The water pipes are now on the side of the road. Before, of course, when they built a road, they put the water pipe underneath the road. So when the water pipe leaks, the ground gets soft, the road gets soft, the truck goes over, you get potholes. Then somebody comes along, digs up the road, picks up the pipe, but don't fix up the road. So we now take everything and put it on the side of the road. So infrastructure becomes a lot more resilient. 6,000 kilometers of electrical cables were blown down after Cyclone Winston. 6,000 kilometers. Now, if we have another cyclone, God forbid, hopefully not this one, but if we get one next year, they could all potentially go down again. We build it back up again. We have another cyclone, they go down again. We build it back up again. It's wastage of money. But putting electrical cables, as you would know, cost more money upfront. So you need to be able to be strategic and know which ones you should put underground first. So at least your business interruption is not there, and you're also not wasting money by rebuilding things over and over again. Health, yes, funding has increased, but our major challenge for health is human capital. We don't have enough specialists. We don't have enough doctors, not because we can't hire them, we actually have those areas being underspent, because we don't have enough qualified doctors. We don't have enough qualified specialists, as has been announced in Parliament and in the media that we have the Minister for Health and her team going down with some doctors to recruit some specialists from India and get those specialists so we are able to decentralize specialist services. You should not have to go from Lautoka to Suva just to see one specialist. People from Ra should not have to travel all the way to far-flung places of Fiji to be able to get access to specialist services. Education, of course, has received a significant boost, which is essentially through free education, toppers and TELs. If I were to put $1 aside for every time somebody said to me, we wish we had free education in our time, I would have had a few $1,000s by now. It is quite unbelievable the impact that free education or the non-paying of school fees has had. It has essentially meant now all school children can actually go to school all the way up to year 13. Many people have said, we wish we had the money, or we wish we either had the money or the government provided free education in our time, because I could have finished high school. We also have had so many people say to us, I used to come first all the time in my class, but my father could not afford to send me to university. So I had to look for a job. There are many people like that, and I'm sure you know many people like that. That's why education is, our education now receives over $500 million worth of the budget. Of course that will increase now, because 69.4% of our entire population is below the age of 40. So, at least for the next 3 years, the spending on toppers and TELs will continue to rise until we reach a stage where we'll reach an equilibrium. Or at least the funding you'll be able to say will be of the same level. Because we have now, when we started TELs, there's some people in the first year, some in the second year, some in the third year. Of course, you've got more people joining them. So, once we're able to go through the full cycle, then we'll know exactly what figure we'll have to plug in for the rest of the years. Access to justice. Today, nearly 14 or 15 different locations throughout Fiji has a Legal Aid Commission office. In 2006, there's only about 3. I think then Ba was sort of open last year. Only Lautoka, Lambasa, and Suva. Then Ba came on. Today, we're about 14 or 15. As I say, Legal Aid Commission is the largest law firm in Fiji. It has got more lawyers than any other organization. It's very important. People who are low-income families, they have access to legal aid. So if they have a criminal matter, they get some representation. Women who are abandoned, men who don't pay their maintenance and claims are made against them, women can claim that. They draft wills now. Generally, drafting of wills or making of wills was only seen as the purview of the rich. A person should be able to draft a will. He may have only maybe one house, or maybe you have only one tractor, but he should be able to she should be allowed to draft a will. And legal aid does that. They also do probate, when people die intestate, which is meaning when they die without making a will, legal aid will also help them. We have now legal aid in also outer islands too. And of course, social protection is welfare, what is commonly known as welfare payments. This includes, of course, abandoned children, single mothers, people below poverty income levels, rural pregnant women. They now get a food voucher because we want them to eat well, so the children that they give birth to are not malnourished. So they're healthier people. You don't have to spend a lot more money when they're actually born in respect of health services. We also started, as you know, for people who are below the age of over the age of 70. Many people in Fiji don't belong to Fiji National Provident Fund. You have a villager, you have an islander, you have a farmer, you have a fisherman who never worked for anybody but worked for themselves, subsistence living. So they never had social protection. So a lot of them now, because of changing society, some of them get abandoned. Some of them don't have access to resources. The children don't want them. So we started off with $30 for those people over the age of 70. Then we increased it to $50, but reduced the age. So today, people who are 66 years and older, they get $50 a month as social protection for those people who are elderly. It's interesting, so just go back. We've had a lot of discussion. Some people get, for example, the welfare payments, people below poverty line, they get a combination of things. They get a food voucher, plus they also get some cash. So we've had in some of the representations, they have said to us, make everything, give it all cash. And then the women will come and say, no, don't give them all cash, because by the time my husband goes and collects the cash, he probably spent half of it on grog and cigarettes. Some people, of course, then argue and say, give it all in food voucher. So, these are the kind of sort of competing interests that you do have. Next one, please. Expenditure mix. This is very important. As you know, there are two types of expenditure government has. One is capital expenditure, one is operating expenditure. Today we are all here, the PS, her team, myself, our salaries comes out from operating expenditure. We're going to say at Waterfront Hotel, the hotel bills will come from the operating expenditure. The fuel costs will come from the operating expenditure. Day-to-day running, photocopying paper, toilet paper, whatever it is that need to run government, comes from operating expenditure. You don't necessarily have anything to show for it the following year, apart from any intellectual capital that may be developed. Capital expenditure, of course, is the money you use to build things. Schools, hospitals, bridges, roads, dispensaries, whatever the airports, whatever the case may be. The expenditure mix, by comparison, in 2004, 83% of the money spent by government went into operating expenditure, 17% went into capital expenditure. By comparison, we now spend 60% as opposed to 83% on operating expenditure, and we spend 40% on capital as opposed to 17%. You can see how over the years it has actually changed, and there has been, at least in 2006, a downward trend in operating expenditure. And we hope to, of course, sharpen that bit more, because obviously the example that I use with the students is that I said to them, if you all want to go and have a party at McDonald's, but you don't have enough money to have the party, and you go to ANZ or whatever bank and say, I want to borrow money to have a party at McDonald's. And ANZ or whichever bank decides to give you the money. You can have the party, you finish the burgers, you finish your drinks, the next morning you wake up, you got nothing to show for the debt. The debt is still there, but the burgers and the drinks are gone. So you borrow money only to build. And you'll see in the next slide that, not this one, but you'll see later on that we have a surplus in our operations, and I'll show you why. Funding for roads and bridges, good old days of PWD, which some people apparently still want back. They spent $55 million. Today we have $527 million for roads, bridges and jetties. It's an enormous program, it's a significant program, and we have to be able to build back better. Water and energy, same story, PWD, $92 million. Today, $337 million. Those of you, of course, who live in towns and cities are lucky. There are many people who live in rural areas who did not have access to rural electrification, all connected to the FEA grid. They could be only 1 kilometer away, 2 kilometers away. And when they wanted to get connected to the grid, you had to pay 10% contribution before FEA would connect you. And sometimes if you had 50 homes, maybe 30 homes gave the contribution, the other 20 did not. When they did not, you did not get connected until everybody gave it. And sometimes those monies actually sat with the government for 5, 6 years. We made a decision 2 years ago, we returned all that funds. Now we don't need 10%, We'll connect you in any case. But of course, there's a long list, and we're going down that list to give that connectivity. We also, for electricity, we pay for those people who earn less than $30,000 a year, households that earn less than $30,000 a year, we subsidize electricity 50%. Unit cost of electricity here is 34 cents for domestic usage. We pay 17 cents for the consumer directly to FEA. So you get the 17 cents bill, not the 34 cents bill. Similarly with water, we supply 90,250 liters of free water a year if you earn less than $30,000 a year. That's based on WHO standards. WHO has said that as an individual, we all require at least 50 liters of water a day to clean, go to the toilet, wash yourself, bathe yourself, and drink water. So based on that, five people per family member, it works out to be over 90,000 liters of free water. Funding for education, of course, as you can see, it's increased. Again, using 2004 as the base year, $270 million. Today is $598 million. As I say, we expect that to increase even further as we get more and more people in the education sector. That also covers, as you know, we provide TELs now for technical colleges also. There's a shortage of technical skill sets in Fiji, ladies and gentlemen. We have construction companies that have brought in workers from Indonesia, Philippines, and even Bangladesh. So we need to, of course, build up the capacity and the depth in our trade skills area too. Next, please. Funding for health, like I said, again, is going up to 244 million. The issue is not necessarily about building more buildings. It's more about investment in human capital. So today, anybody that is hired by government to work in the public sector, as you know, last year we gave doctors up to an 80% pay rise. But today, if you join the health center as a health sector as a doctor, we pay for all your postgraduate studies at Fiji National University. The moment you join government, you want to go and do a postgrad study at FNU, we'll pay for you to do it. We want more and more people to specialize. As I said, I've used the example, there is not a single cardiologist available in Fiji that can do open heart surgery on you 24/7. For the 21st century, in the year of 2017, that's a very sad state of affairs to be in. You don't turn out an open heart surgeon overnight. You can't do an MBBS and then cut me open and play around with my heart. You can't do that. You need at least 10, 15 years of experience, exposure, training offshore. Unfortunately, that investment was not done. We're doing that now. In the meantime, we need to fill in the gap, and that gap will only come about by way of bringing people, specialists from overseas. If you bring good specialists, they can also train our people over here and give them that level of exposure. Now, this is what I was talking about. Our operating revenue, which is all the way from here to there, that's the total value. Operating expenditure is the brown bit, and that's the savings we are making as far as the operating savings are concerned. In other words, we make enough money, more than enough money, to pay for our operating day-to-day expenses. And after paying for our day-to-day expenses, we have a surplus here. You can do the comparison there. I don't need to read that out to you, 2004 and 2016-17. We, of course, want this green line to get thicker, this place to get thicker, which means we have to borrow less if you have surplus as far as your operating revenue and expenditure is concerned. Many people talk about government debt without understanding debt themselves. Many journalists do that too, many politicians do that too, many business people do that too without understanding debt. Nominal debt, as you can see, has increased. But debt as a percentage of GDP has decreased except for this bit here because of Cyclone Winston. The example that I use with the students is this. Assuming that our total wealth of our country is $100, or GDP. GDP is $100. We then go out and borrow $20. Our debt to GDP ratio then is 20%. Value of our GDP is $100, we borrow $20, that means your debt, which is $20, GDP is $100, 20%. The wealth of our country increases to $500. But instead of borrowing $20, we go and borrow $50, double the amount, 2.5 times the amount that we borrowed before. But $50 is only 10% of $500. So your ability to borrow the nominal sum increases. But as a percentage of your GDP, it decreases. And that is what you need to measure. Nominal debt has gone up, of course, $4.9 billion. But our debt to GDP ratio has come down. If it wasn't for Winston here, this line would have come down even further. Let me give you a comparison of other countries. Debt to GDP ratio. Japan is 239.2%. So they are borrowing 239.2% more than the actual GDP, the debt exposure. But of course, it's a developed country, it's got a AAA rating. People don't talk about it. USA, 107.4%. Maldives, 81.5%. Seychelles, 68.6%. Nauru, Mauritius, which everybody uses as an example, is 62.7%. Why? I recently went to Mauritius. Mauritius has invested very significantly in infrastructure. Speaking to people who were in Mauritius 15, 20 years ago, the infrastructure was very bad. But the government made a tactical move. They saw themselves as an area of stability off the coast of Africa. Large market. Africa is a large market. So now you have many rich Africans coming to Mauritius, not just for holidays, but for hospital services, buying of apartments. But the only way they were able to attract them is by putting in infrastructure, four-laning of roads, bridges, proper water systems, which of course increase their debt. But that debt, of course, will pay off as long as you're borrowing for the right reasons. We sit here at 46.3%. There, by comparison, we've also put the countries that have a lower debt to GDP ratio, which is Australia. You would think that Australia's debt to GDP ratio would be much lower given the fact that they had a huge windfall with the natural resources sector. But even they have a debt to GDP ratio not far away from us at 41.1%, and the others, as you can see, are listed there. So, ladies and gentlemen, in summary, we expect the economy to grow to about 3.6% in 2017 and onwards. Very favorable growth prospects for the medium term, and that's the projections not just by the Reserve Bank of Fiji, but also by other independent third parties. We see a lot of increased private sector investment and optimism. There's a lot of incentives that we have provided, and a lot of private sector people are investing. You'll see a lot of construction also going on. As you can see, we've been very prudent with our fiscal management and sustainable debt position. Higher capital expenditure and operating savings. Broad-based growth. We see a lot of potential in the services sector. Given the fact that you have 69.4% of the population below the age of 40, the uptake of technology is a lot more higher in Fiji. Today, we have more SIM cards in operation than actual number of people in Fiji. I know some of you carry 2 mobile numbers. Some carry it for very legitimate reasons, some of them for very illegitimate reasons. But of course, we have a lot of young people who have access to technology. We have nearly 500,000 mobile phones in operation in Fiji. As you know, we reduced the duty on smartphones, zero-rated duty. So with that, through the broadband access, a lot more people have access to internet, Facebook, Viber, whatever the case may be. So people are a lot more technologically savvy. What does that mean? It means that we have the opportunity to have more call centers, back-end processing, data centers. And that's what we are targeting. As you know, that recently our High Commissioner to Australia, who's also from Lautoka, Yogesh Punja, brought in a team of about 10 or 12 investors who are interested in call centers. Call centers is obviously a very good prospects for the growth of the services sector. We're also looking at some opportunities in the medical sector, and we'll actually make those announcements in due course. Foreign reserves, as you can see, is all-time high, and inflation, of course, is set to stabilize below 3% in the medium term. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a very short presentation in respect to where we are. Hopefully, they'll help you to contextualize things. And so we'll now open up the floor. Please feel free to ask any questions or make any submissions. Please, if you have a very lengthy submission, I request that you don't make it lengthy. but rather you can put it down in writing later on if you want to make a lengthy submission, but if you want to make a few points, please do so. Please summarize them. But as I said, this is the email address that you can send it to. After this, if you want to make some suggestions, you can post it. I prefer you do not post it, but emailed it, because we expect all the submissions in by next Friday. And also, if you are visiting Suva, you can drop it off at that address. So thank you. We'll open up the floor. We've got somebody going around with the mic. Thanks.